I want to help you have amazing small groups. I want you to have fruitful conversation with students. And we believe that pretty much all fruitful ministry follows this pattern of 3 stories. This involves sharing your story, uncover the ways God's at work in your life, discover their story. So draw them out and hear how God is at work in their life. And then thirdly, you need to learn to connect the threads to God's story. It's really exciting to help a student recognize God has been doing things in your life. These are some of the clues that show me that God is at work. Okay, so we're going to focus primarily on how to discover their story. Specifically in a small group setting. How can you have a great small group with vibrant discussion where kids really feel known and they feel loved and they feel safe to begin letting people into those vulnerable parts of their heart and their experience? That's what we want to do in small group. I'm going to go fast. I will cover a lot of information and maybe even give you some places to pause and kind of think. So just absorb as much as you can, maybe come back and watch it again. I'm going to go quickly. So I believe this process of discovering the student's story in a small group environment, it can kind of fall into 3 categories, right? You need to ask God questions, you need to ask good questions, and you need to ask questions good. And here's what I mean by that very first one. Ask God questions. When you're dealing with another human being, it is vitally important that you pay closer attention to what God says about that person than what your eyes and ears say about that person. Now, God's going to inform your eyes and ears through common sense. Like you're going to learn just by paying attention, but ask God questions because you can be fooled by appearances. What does it say in 2 Corinthians 5, verse 16? From now on, we regard no one according to the flesh. What we see on the outside, it can fool you. He says, even though we once regarded Christ according to the flesh, we regard him thus no longer. Hey, we wrote Jesus off. Paul is saying this. Paul was a hater of Christians, a hater of Jesus, a hater of that way. And Paul says, I was wrong. I wrote him off and I was wrong. I thought, who is this character from Galilee? Who is this guy who claims to be the Messiah, the chosen one of God? And you know what? I was wrong. He came back from the dead. He met me on the road to Damascus. He slapped me upside the head. I was wrong about Jesus. And now I look around and I think, man, I could be wrong about anybody because Jesus could be at work in them. Let's think about Paul from a broader context. Anyone who wrote Paul off was wrong. They said, Paul's a murderer. Paul's a hater of the faith. He would never, ever turn to follow Jesus, much less become a spokesperson for Christianity. They were wrong. They were wrong to write him off. And Paul says this in verse 17. He says, therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. It's really important that you believe what God says about people. And what God says is that they are loved, they are treasures, they are somebody that he has died for, somebody his spirit is calling to, somebody he has an eternal hope and plan for. You don't know their future, so believe what God says about kids, not just what your eyes and ears say, not even what they say about themselves. So ask God questions when you engage with students. God, what are you up to? What are you hoping and dreaming for these kids? God, show me a glimpse inside your plan for this student and help me to be part of the process of drawing them to you, helping them see their need for new life in Christ. And then they're a brand new creature, right? And they need somebody in their corner who is rooting for the very best version of them. That's what they need. So ask God questions. Believe what God says about that person. So pause for a second and think, who is it in your group that you have jumped to some conclusions, maybe made some negative assumptions about, and just take a few minutes this week to pray for the students in your group and ask God, God, what do you see in these kids? And what do you want me to see in these kids? I challenge you, take some time, literally name by name in your group, to ask God about those students. All right, let's move on. So in that small group, we want to draw out student stories. And if we get God's vision for them, that's a huge head start. And so then practically, what are we going to do? Well, I would say the simplest thing you can do is ask good questions. Now, there's a lot of things to say about asking good questions. Something in particular, just a really practical perspective here, is start with your questions on their home turf. My Life Matters, part of our mission is that we meet young people right where they are. Sometimes that means we go to their school or we go to their football game, but I think if we have them in our small group, let's meet them where they are. Like, ask them what they're interested in. And I think about Jesus, who, when he called Peter, their conversation began around fishing. I mean, Jesus got in the boat with him. Jesus gave him some coaching on how to catch 1 billion fish. Jesus even invited him into a spiritual transforming life. He invited him to faith through the language of fishing, right? Follow me and I will make you fishers of men. And so I just think, let's follow Jesus's model. Let's meet people where they are. Ask them about video games. Ask them about their dating relationship. Ask them about whether they made the team and the drills they're doing. Ask them, this is not just sort of a thing we do to get to know kids at the beginning. This is an ongoing way of saying, I care about what you care about. So ask good questions that start on their home turf. And then I was thinking, it's really easy to get into teacher mode and only ask questions that really are making your point. And so sometimes you can do that, but sometimes you need to ask questions that genuinely, like, they're just about discovering information. So I'll give you an example. I might be teaching about sin, and I might say, have you ever told a lie? Have you ever dishonored your parents? That's not a question. I'm not trying to get information from a kid, and they know that. I'm trying to back them into a corner and make them agree with the point that all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. Is that important to know? Yes. Is that important to teach? Yes. But don't think you've been somebody asking good questions that draws out their story. No, you're just making a point, and that point is good. But also, sometimes ask questions that gives you information you didn't have before. Don't just ask a question that you already think you know the answer to. So when asking a kid those kinds of questions, try to make them open-ended. Talking about how they went out for the team, ask them, how did that feel? Or what was that like? Or how did you prepare? Or what did you guys do after the game? Or, ask them questions that it just opens the door for them to share about the experience. And even here, be careful. Don't ask questions that shut the conversation down. Like, too many yes or no questions, and the conversation just ends. Like, did you make the team? Yes. All right, moving on. Or be careful. Don't put too many words or emotions in their mouth. Like, were you excited? Yes, I was excited. Well, maybe they were a mix of emotions. And if you just say, how did you feel? Or what did you say? Like that gets them kind of rolling. And you can even be pretty bold. You can ask questions without question marks. That means you can just you can say, hey, tell me about yesterday. It's a little more forceful. It's really reaching in and drawing them out. It's a question without a question mark. Tell me more about that. These are ways of drawing out more information without planting the words in their mouth or just moving on and making your point. So these are good questions. So pause for a minute and think about how to ask some good questions. Questions that open the conversation, questions that open the floor for them to share what they did and how they felt, and questions that really spark new information for you, not just questions that you already know the answer to. All right. Ask God questions. Ask good questions. And my third part is ask questions good. Ask questions good. What do I mean by this? Well, I would say foundationally, in order to be a good questioner, you have to care about the person and their answer. You just have to care. So I watched a video where this lady was explaining her interview style, and she's just very practiced at interviewing people, drawing out their story. And she said there's all kinds of tips about making eye contact and saying making affirming gestures. And she said, turns out you don't need any tricks to make it look like you care about the person if you actually care. You don't need tips and tricks. You just need to care. So if you're actually interested, that comes through in your body language. It comes through in your posture. So you must listen to the answers. That's how you ask questions good. You must listen to the answers. This is the language of love, listening well. And there's some good evidence that you're listening well. Eye contact is good evidence. Or follow up, like, oh, well, say more about that. Or how did that make you feel? Or, whoa, I've never encountered, that kind of follow up. Remembering what they said. So take notes if somebody has a prayer request, or take notes if somebody has a big thing coming up, and follow up a week later. Remembering a student's details about their life and listening well. That's fundamentally, that's how you ask questions good. However, I want to give you a little more. This is often what people think. They think that makes good questioning is gimmicks and tricks and training. And the truth of the matter is those can be helpful. And I'm going to give you a couple in the next 3 minutes, but they're not the foundation. The foundation is caring about the person enough to listen to their answer. All right. So I guess finally, part of asking questions good is doing the prep work, like really respecting a student's time and attention and saying, I'm going to do the work to not be boring. I'm going to do the legwork to do better than just read a list to you. Like, that's not really me giving you my best. And so I'm going to give you my best, you give me your best. And so when I'm preparing questions, I'm often creating some kind of plan to make it interesting. So when I ask questions, I usually try to come up with some kind of game, and this game might be a ticket to play game. So what I mean is, if I ask a kid a question, it's like, James, tell me one food that you love. James says, I love spaghetti. All right, James, thanks for answering my question. You get to play the game. I can bring any game to the table, and they get to play. And it's just sort of the reward for answering my question. It makes it interesting. So you could just play one-on-one. I have BattleBots right here. Every kid loves to play BattleBot. Playing it is fun. Winning is not the point. So you said you like spaghetti. You gave me a piece of your life and your attention span, and I'm giving you this game. Or you could play Jenga, or you could play tic-tac-toe, or four in a row, Connect Four, or any game that you have played over the years with your children on a car ride. Any game can work right here. The point is, this is just a way to make answering a list of questions engaging. So when you treat the question like kind of the ticket to play the game, that's useful if you want to control the order of your questions, right? You can just have the list of questions and control the order of questions. They can be get to know you questions. They can be questions connected to learning the scriptures, So you could be learning about Psalm 139, verse 13. For you formed my inward parts, you knitted me together, right? And you could say, David is writing this. Who is he talking to? All right, Liliana, who is he talking to? And she answers the question and say, all right, thanks for answering. Now you get to go next in the game of Jenga. And you can split your whole group into two teams. So you could say, all right, this is this side against that side, and you play back and forth however you want to do it. Right? So that's one way of asking questions. Think to yourself, what are some simple supplies I could bring? A game of Jenga, a game of tic-tac-toe, a card game, a matching game, anything. Even one of those little, some of those carnival games, like toss a ping pong ball into a cup or shoot a dart at a board. These games are not important. The part of what's going on is this recognition that you have made an effort in this exchange of information, right? You are working to make it interesting, okay? So that's one type of game, Ticket to Play. The other version of games that I use, I call them treasure hunt. And this is any game or any activity where you make the process of finding the question a little bit interesting. So this is different because you can't really control the order in which the questions get asked. You might say, everybody reach up under your chair, and there's a question taped to an index card. And you pull out the index card that's been taped to your chair, and you just go around and read the questions. There's just a little effort made to find the questions. Or you could say, all right, I've got a dice right here. You roll the dice, and you have to answer one of these questions. So you just roll the dice. Oh, that's a 6. So you get question 6, and you pull it off the wall. Or one we used to do is I'd write the questions on little bits of paper, roll them up, and put them in a balloon. So all you got to do, pop a balloon, pull out the piece of paper, read the question. There's a lot of varieties in ways to play this. Put them in a paper bag. Maybe it's more simple. Maybe you just ask a question, and people who answer the question get a piece of candy. It's just this two-way street where you say, I'm asking something of you, and I'm giving something in return. I'm valuing what you're giving me. I'm not demanding that it be a one-way street where you give to me, you give to me, you give to me because I'm in charge. And it's okay and appropriate to ask kids to respect leaders, but it just goes a long way if you show them you have made an effort in the process to draw out their story. So take some time to think, what are the interesting ways you can prepare in order to ask questions of your students? Most important, ask God questions about those kids. What's going to happen today, Lord? What's going on in their life? Give me some compassion, some understanding, some supernatural revelation. Ask good questions that open the conversation and give you information you didn't have before. Kids can tell if you care about their answers. And number 3, ask questions good. Primarily, that means listening well. And secondarily, it means put in the prep work to make your time interesting.